name is Cassandra Ratzliff. This is my final project for educating exceptional students, where I'm just going to talk to you about the different disorders that I learned about and the ways as an educator that I will accommodate and make adaptations for these students. The first disability I'm going to talk about is learning disabilities. Learning disabilities actually have the highest inclusion rates than all the other disabilities, which is really important to have as much inclusion time as possible in a classroom. For any student who has any kind of disability, the more they can be in the classroom, the more they can get exposure to their peers and learning social skills, and so that's really good that they can have those and then have the adaptations in the classroom or bring a parent into the classroom so they can get that experience. Differentiated instruction is very helpful for these students. Like I talked about, those adaptations, maybe just a different time limit for that student, or maybe their questions can be a little bit different just to kind of like tailor these lessons. Maybe there's a technology resource out there for that student. I've seen that done in the classroom, or even just a para being there and kind of just helping them write some things they can't write or get the words that they are just struggling with. Just having that little bit extra support in the classroom. Using advanced organizers, and then testing accommodations like extra time to take a test. Maybe they can do an oral presentation for you. Maybe they just need like a calculator on some things. That's not something that I recommend all the time, but that can be helpful. These students with these learning disabilities, they are usually average or above average intelligence. And they might just struggle maybe a little bit with short-term memory, long-term memory, working memory. And these students can have just higher anxieties, social, emotional challenges as well. Communication disorders are speech and language impairments, or problems receiving information and responding to information. The best thing with these communication disorders is to find that early intervention and get that as soon as possible for these kids. The speech and language pathologist is the one that's going to determine how serious or severe that this impairment is for them, and that is going to lead us to the kind of accommodations that those students are going to need. So they could be anywhere like mild to severe, so that they may need a little bit more help, a little bit less. Some kids may just even need that little bit of pull-out time to work on those speech those speech impairments, and then some may need paras and people in the room to be helping them with communication. Some test accommodations that are helpful is, instead of those more lengthy questions, maybe a multiple choice question, true or false, those short answer for them. So because these impairments do affect them academically, socially, emotionally, in their development. So there are a wide range of help in the classroom that they will need with those disorders, and so that pathologist can tell the teacher and the people working with the student what the best fit, determining their severity level. Okay. Emotional or behavioral disorders. Now, these are some characteristics that will hinder that academic education for those kids. They might be aggressive, maybe non-compliant, depression, anxiety, just a little more withdrawn. Accommodations, a big one for these kiddos could even just be breaks in that testing or that seat work, just kind of when you notice that they're just maybe a trigger, or maybe they're just getting a little bit worked up and they're just getting a little bit out of place. They can go get a drink, go to the water fountain, take a short break and come back and just revisit. These are behavioral, social, or academic issues that affect any of those issues that are now going to affect them academically. 6% of all students with disabilities have emotional or behavioral disorders. A big one with these kiddos that we need as they go through school is dropout prevention, because they are having the lowest inclusion rate, and A lot of these kids, we see them. I know our school district has a school called Alps. You know, these kids are those kids that end up there spending days or weeks at a time. They just can't handle in the classroom. So they do have the lowest inclusion rate. So they need to have dropout prevention in place, especially for those older kids who are going to be able to start making that decision for themselves. And we want them to feel successful, and we want them to know that you care and you believe in them. And just trying different strategies for these kids is a big help. Yeah, the accommodations are those extended time. Maybe they just need a little more time for the test, and those breaks in there. ADHD, which stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. Multiple causes for this, including heredity, brain structures, and environment. As a teacher of a student with ADHD, I would arrange my classroom in a way that is going to be successful for them. That is taking just distractions out, the smoothest transition around the classroom. For smooth transitions, these students are just easily distracted. Setting goals with these students is huge. So as a teacher, just knowing what your goals for them are, checking in with those goals. And then they need help with organizational skills. They are just, their focus isn't always there to be thinking about these things and keeping that in order. So just things you can do with these kids. Maybe they need to have an agenda, and there's an accountability for having it signed, and they can have rewards tied into that. Maybe showing them a picture on their desk of what their desk needs to look like, and their goal is to organize it that way. These are just little organizational things that you can do as a teacher. 7% of these children 7% of children are diagnosed with ADHD. There are a lot of causes for ADHD: heredity, brain structure, environment, and some students who have ADHD do not actually qualify for special education. So a 504 plan can be a good thing for those kids who just need that little bit extra help and intervention. But I think a lot of, on the minor scale, a lot of these can be helped in the classroom with those setting up your classroom in a way that is helpful for these kids, and just putting those interventions in the classroom and just being aware of those things that help these individual students. Okay. Intellectual abilities. These are described as limitations in intellectual functioning and adaptive behavior. As a classroom teacher, a lot of times these aren't a lot of inclusion time with the general education teacher, but when they are with you, you can provide support by having help test questions read to them by a paraprofessional. That's assistive technology, and these students in their special education setting will need curriculum for life skills is highly recommended for these kiddos. So autism is a disorder of, it is defined as being a developmental disability. Some characteristics of autism include atypical language development, problem behavior, sensory and movement disorders, and differences in intellectual functioning. Autism is a really wide spectrum. I kind of showed a picture here. There's really high functioning autism, and then all the way to just a very, classic severe learning disability. I have had the privilege to work with the same autistic student for the past 2 years. 1 year in 4th grade as her substitute teacher. A lot of times I subbed in that room. And then in 5th grade, this last year, I got to mentor in her classroom. And I actually get the very unique ability to teach her next year because I was hired on as a 6th grade teacher for a long-term sub for the year. So I'm really excited to work with her because I've got to learn her. And that is a huge help with these autistic kiddos. They thrive on consistency and organization, even though they may not realize that they want that, but they do thrive when, we can get her her own box and her school supplies are in it, and she knows that she needs to get up from her seat because her desk isn't always organized. Her agenda is a huge thing. And she is on a behavior sheet, and so her goal is just to be respectful, because sometimes her behavior just isn't very tactful. She says what's on her mind. So teaching her those social skills, doing those scenarios, real life scenarios with social skills, and showing her that what she says isn't always helpful, and just teaching her, the correct way. With students with autism, being very literal is important, straightforward with what your expectations are, being consistent, be kind with them, but be firm with them. They need to know exactly what you expect of them, and you really can't give them a lot of room, because that's just an inconsistency to them that is not helpful. Some big helpful things is breaks, frequent breaks, and they know when those breaks are going to be. In the day, I know that the girl I work with gets 2 breaks a day, and those are just set no matter what. You don't take those away. That's not a punishment. She gets those breaks. She needs those breaks. So that's very helpful for her. Traumatic brain injuries. These are short-term or long-term effects to the memory. That's actually just the experience I have had with a kiddo. He is in the same class as the autistic girl, and he had a brain injury at a young age in a car accident, and he just has his short-term and long-term memory were very strongly affected, very low working level, and he actually has a complete schedule adaptation throughout the day. So he has a list he follows, and sometimes he can be inclusive in the classroom, and there's always an adaptation for them. Usually there's a parent in there helping them write, or just maybe just helping them be on task, ask any questions that they have, because they are at that lower level. So they get lots of inclusion time, a lot. These kiddos do. Para may be helpful to them, but definitely adaptations, changing the lengths of their questions, maybe changing the types of questions you're asking them, or even just the length requirements of an assignment. Maybe they don't have to do as much. Now, traumatic brain injuries, these are only ones that have been caused after birth by external force. Hearing loss is defined as conductive loss. It's caused by a problem in the outer and the inner ear. Particularly concerning are the achievement levels in reading and writing for these kids, because they just aren't hearing things as well, and that could be affect the way that they are outputting the information. Hearing aids do help. They do make it louder, but they can cause it to be a little bit distorted, so that can still cause some issues. And these kiddos, as a teacher, as their teacher, you need to make sure they have access to a language-rich environment. I would think that a kiddo who has hearing loss is going to do really well if they're getting multiple ways of information. It's being read, it's being watched, maybe a technology piece, working in partners, just lots of opportunities to hear the information in different ways. You need to make them make these real world connections. I know in 3rd grade we started huge text connections to self, text to world. These kiddos need that. Why am I reading what I read, and how does this affect me? And that's going to help them to make those connections. And then a big help and adaptation for these kids is have them read back to you and summarize what they learned, so that you know how much that they took in and that they comprehended it well. So, thank you.